You are not scrolling because you're bored. You're scrolling because you've lost the ability to tolerate your own consciousness. The phone isn't the addiction, it's the escape hatch from a selfhood you can no longer bear to inhabit. Every notification is a permission slip to abandon the present moment, and you've been signing it 2,000 times a day. By the end of this video, you'll understand the invisible mechanism turning you into a ghost in your own life, and the ancient framework that can resurrect your attention from its digital grave. Right now, place your phone face down, out of arm's reach. Feel the microsecond of panic, that tiny flare of separation anxiety. That feeling, that's not about missing a message. That's your nervous system mistaking disconnection from the device for disconnection from existence itself. The Stoics had a concept, prosos, continuous attention, the vigilant guard standing watch over the movements of your own mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote it in his private journals, reminding himself daily, guard the ruling center. Protect the command post of consciousness from invasion. He was writing about barbarians at the gates of Rome. You're fighting something far more insidious. Your phone doesn't invade, it seduces. It offers you a trade so subtle you never consciously agreed to it. Give me your attention in fragments, and I'll save you from the discomfort of being alone with yourself. The deal seems harmless. A few seconds here, a minute there. But attention, unlike money, cannot be saved or recovered. Spend it unconsciously, and you're not just wasting time, you're dismantling the architecture of self. Here's the mechanism. Your brain evolved over millions of years to survive in a world of genuine threats and rewards. A rustle in the grass might be a predator. A ripe fruit on a branch meant another day of survival. Your dopamine system, that ancient chemical messenger, learned to fire at unpredictability, not at the reward itself, but at the possibility of reward. The slot machine in your pocket understands this better than you do. Every notification is engineered uncertainty. Will it be important, trivial, devastating, delightful? Your brain cannot help but attend to this uncertainty. It's not weakness, it's neurobiology mistaking digital stimuli for survival information. The mechanism that kept your ancestors alive is now keeping you in a state of perpetual half-attention, scanning for threats and rewards that don't exist. But here's what the Stoics understood that modern neuroscience confirms. Attention is not just what you focus on, it's the sculptor of your character. Where your attention goes, neural pathways strengthen. What you repeatedly attend to becomes who you are. You think you're just checking your phone. You're actually training your brain to find sustained focus intolerable, solitude unbearable, and presence impossible. The invisible mechanism works like this. Your phone creates what psychologists call a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, the most addictive reward pattern ever discovered. Sometimes checking yields nothing, sometimes it yields everything. This unpredictability keeps you locked in a loop of compulsive checking because your brain cannot tolerate unresolved uncertainty. But deeper than behavioral conditioning lies something more sinister: identity erosion. The Stoics believed that character is built through repeated voluntary action. Virtue isn't an abstract concept, it's the strengthening of your capacity to act according to reason rather than impulse. Every time you reach for your phone without deciding to, you're practicing impulsivity. You're rehearsing a self that acts without intention, that moves through life reactive rather than deliberate. You're not building an addiction, you're building a different person. The mechanism is invisible because it operates beneath the threshold of conscious choice. You don't decide to check your phone 300 times a day. Your hand moves before you realize you've decided. The gesture has become automatic, encoded so deeply in your motor cortex that it bypasses your prefrontal cortex entirely, the region responsible for conscious choice and self-control. Epictetus taught that we are what we repeatedly do in moments of unconsciousness. Modern neuroscience calls this procedural memory. The Stoics called it character. You've spent years training yourself to be someone who cannot sit with their own mind, someone who reaches for distraction the moment discomfort surfaces, someone who mistakes the buzzing simulation of connection for the difficult, raw work of actual presence. The mechanism isn't the phone. It's the systematic transformation of your attention from a tool you wield to a resource you've surrendered. The cage was built one distracted moment at a time, and you open the door yourself every single time. How we descend into what you've actually been trading away. Layer 1. Psychological consequences. Your inner world is collapsing into shallow states. There's a type of psychological depth that requires duration, the kind of thinking that unfolds slowly, recursively, building complexity over minutes and hours rather than seconds. Philosophical contemplation, creative problem-solving, emotional processing. These aren't activities you do, they're states you must sustain. But your fragmented attention has made sustained states physiologically intolerable. Neuroscientists studying attention networks have discovered something disturbing. The brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-reflection, memory consolidation, and meaning-making, only activates during periods of sustained, undirected thought. When you constantly interrupt this with digital stimuli, you're not just missing moments of insight, you're preventing the neural state where identity consolidates, where experience transforms into wisdom, where you metabolize your own life into understanding. You're accumulating experiences without digesting them, living a life without inhabiting it. You've lost the capacity for psychological silence, not the absence of thought, but the spaciousness where thoughts can unfold without interruption. Layer 2. Behavioral consequences. Your actions are becoming automated responses rather than deliberate choices. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive control center, is metabolically expensive. It requires tremendous energy to maintain conscious decision-making. So the brain, in its efficiency, automates whatever you do repeatedly. These automated behaviors get encoded in the basal ganglia, a more primitive brain structure. They become habits that run without conscious input. This is useful for behaviors like walking or typing. It's catastrophic for behaviors like reaching for your phone. Here's what's happening. Every time you check your phone in response to discomfort, boredom, or anxiety, you're strengthening a neural pathway that says, discomfort equals distraction. The pathway becomes so strong that eventually the urge to check and the action of checking become functionally instantaneous. The decision-making step vanishes entirely. You're not choosing to avoid discomfort anymore. You've automated the avoidance. The Stoics would call this akresia, acting against your own better judgment, not because you've chosen wrongly, but because you're no longer choosing at all. Your behavior has decoupled from your values. You've become a machine responding to triggers, running programs you never consciously installed. Neuroscience reveals something even more troubling. These automated behavioral loops activate the brain's reward system even when they provide no actual satisfaction. Your brain releases dopamine in anticipation of reward, but the reward rarely comes. So you're locked in a cycle of craving without satisfaction, seeking without finding, reaching without grasping. You're hungry but unable to eat, thirsty but unable to drink. But here's what changes everything. The Stoics never fought their obstacles, they transmuted them. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, betrayal, war, the crushing weight of empire, and he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Your phone addiction isn't the problem you need to solve. It's the teacher you've been refusing to listen to. Every time you reach for your phone, you're receiving information about your inner state. The compulsion isn't random, it's diagnostic. It surfaces precisely when you're encountering something your psyche cannot yet tolerate. Boredom, anxiety, grief, inadequacy, the vast emptiness beneath achievement, the silence where unlived questions wait. The addiction is a messenger, and you've been killing the messenger instead of reading the message. Here's the reversal. You don't need to defeat your phone use through willpower or discipline or behavioral hacks. You need to develop the internal capacity that makes compulsive distraction unnecessary. You need to become someone who can sit with discomfort without fleeing, not because you're stronger, but because you've built the psychological architecture that makes presence bearable. The Stoics called this ascesis, not asceticism in the modern sense of deprivation, but training, practice, the deliberate cultivation of inner capacity. Like an athlete doesn't fight gravity, They strengthen their muscles until gravity becomes workable. You don't fight your phone's pull. You strengthen your capacity for undistracted presence until the pull loses its power. The phone isn't holding you captive. You've been holding yourself in place through repeated unconscious action, strengthening the rope with every compulsive check, every moment of practiced fragmentation. The rope isn't external. It's neural pathways you've built yourself, synaptic connections you've reinforced through thousands of repetitions. And what you've built, you can unbuild. Not by cutting the rope, that's willpower, and willpower depletes, but by consciously building different pathways, practicing different responses, training your nervous system to find stillness tolerable and presence rewarding. This is the shift that changes everything. Stop trying to use less phone. Start training yourself to tolerate more reality. The addiction will dissolve, not because you've restricted access, but because you've removed the internal conditions that make compulsive escape necessary. You'll stop reaching for your phone, not because you've locked it away, but because you've become someone who can sit with themselves without terror. This isn't about discipline, it's about transformation. You don't need to be stronger than your phone. You need to become someone your phone has nothing to offer. Someone who has learned to metabolize discomfort instead of avoiding it. Someone who has built the internal spaciousness where thoughts can unfold without triggering panic. Someone who can be alone with themselves without it feeling like abandonment. The framework that follows isn't about managing your phone. It's about architecting a self that no longer needs constant escape. It's Stoic philosophy made systematic, practical, embodied, not as ancient wisdom to admire, but as a technology of consciousness you implement daily. This is the shift. From fighting the symptom to building the capacity. From resisting the compulsion to removing its cause. From white-knuckling through discipline to becoming someone for whom discipline is unnecessary, because their inner world has become inhabitable. The cage was never the phone, it was your inability to sit with yourself, and you're about to learn how to pick the lock from the inside. Now we build the architecture. This isn't a list of tips. This is a systematic restructuring of your relationship with attention, distraction, and selfhood. 3 practices, each targeting a different layer of your being. Internal, external, integration, mind, behavior, identity. The Stoics didn't theorize, they trained. What follows is training. Internal practice. The discomfort. Audit. Every compulsive reach for your phone is preceded by a feeling, a microsecond of internal weather you've learned to flee before fully experiencing it. Boredom, restlessness, inadequacy, the peculiar emptiness that surfaces between tasks, the anxiety that blooms in silence. Your internal practice is this: name the feeling before you reach, not after, not during, before. When your hand moves toward your phone, freeze the motion. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now that I'm trying to escape? Don't analyze it. Don't judge it. Just name it with brutal honesty. I'm feeling inadequate. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling the weight of a decision I don't want to make. I'm feeling the emptiness of having nothing that feels urgent. The Stoics called this prosoche, attention to the movements of your own mind. Here's the crucial part. After you name the feeling, stay with it for 30 seconds. Don't fix it. Don't solve it. Don't reach for the phone. Just breathe and let the feeling exist in your body. Notice where it lives: throat, chest, stomach. Notice its texture, its temperature, its movement. You're not trying to make it go away. You're developing the capacity to let it be present without it destroying you. Most people never develop this capacity. They spend their entire lives in a low-grade flight response, constantly medicating discomfort with stimulation. But discomfort isn't the enemy. Discomfort is information. It's your psyche's way of telling you something needs attention, not digital attention, but conscious presence. External practice. The friction ritual. Behavioral change without environmental restructuring is delusion. Your brain conserves energy by automating whatever's easiest. If reaching for your phone requires no conscious decision, it will remain automated. You must reintroduce friction. Make the unconscious conscious by making the easy difficult. Here's the practice. Every morning, turn off all notifications. Every evening, place your phone in a different room than where you sleep, inside a drawer or box, not beside your bed, not on your nightstand, a different room, inside something that requires opening. This isn't about access, it's about decision architecture. When checking your phone requires getting up, walking to another room, opening a container, you've inserted 3 decision points where there was previously 0. 3 moments where your prefrontal cortex reactivates. 3 opportunities to catch yourself and ask, do I actually choose this, or is this just the program running? One more element, choose one daily activity that must remain phone-free. Meals, morning routines, or the first hour after waking, not as deprivation, as reclamation. You're reclaiming these moments as territories of presence, zones where your attention belongs fully to the direct experience of being alive. No mediation, no documentation, no splitting yourself between here and elsewhere. When you eat, eat. When you wake, wake. Simple, ancient, impossible for most people. Possible for you if you practice it as training rather than restriction. Integration. Practice. The evening testimony. Internal and external practices target moments. Integration practice targets identity, the narrative you tell yourself about who you are. Every evening, before sleep, speak one sentence aloud about your day's relationship with attention, not written, spoken, to yourself or to the empty room. Examples. Today I chose presence 3 times when I wanted to escape. Today I fled discomfort 12 times and stayed present twice. This practice has 3 functions. First, it makes unconscious behavior conscious. You cannot speak a testimony about something you haven't tracked. The act of preparing to speak forces awareness throughout the day. Second, it removes moral judgment. You're not confessing sins or celebrating victories. You're stating facts. Your behavior is data, useful data, but just data. Third, it builds identity through repeated declaration. Neuroscience reveals that self-talk, especially spoken aloud, activates different neural networks than silent thought. You're literally programming your self-concept through verbal testimony. Over weeks and months, these testimonies compound into a shift in how you perceive yourself. You stop being someone trying not to use their phone and become someone who practices conscious attention. The difference is everything. The Stoics ended each day with evening reflection, examining their actions, their responses, their alignments and misalignments with their principles. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations as exactly this practice, speaking to himself about himself, holding up a mirror to his own consciousness. Your evening testimony is the same technology, not self-improvement, self-accounting, the patient, persistent examination of who you're practicing being. Now, something important you must remember. You will fail at these practices, repeatedly. You'll forget the discomfort audit. You'll disable the friction barriers. You'll skip the evening testimony for a week. This isn't failure, it's data. The practice isn't perfection. The practice is returning. The phone addiction took years to build. Unbuilding it is measured in months, not days. But every moment of conscious presence is a brick removed from the prison. Every named feeling is a bar loosened. Every evening testimony is proof that you're still authoring your own transformation. You're not trying to become someone who never reaches for their phone. You're becoming someone who reaches consciously, who can sit with themselves without terror, who has metabolized enough discomfort that constant escape is no longer necessary. That person emerges through practice, not dramatic change. Small, repeated, deliberate actions that compound over time into a different nervous system, a different set of defaults, a different self. Now you face a choice, not moral, but existential. You either continue becoming someone whose life happens in the gaps between notifications, whose attention is owned by algorithms, whose self dissolves into reactive fragments, or you begin the training, you build the architecture, you reclaim the sovereignty over your own consciousness that you traded away one distracted moment at a time. If this framework landed somewhere real in you, if you felt the recognition of your own fragmentation and the possibility of reclamation, Then let that recognition become action. Hit like, not as approval, but as commitment, as a small symbolic gesture that says, I'm ready to stop fleeing myself. I'm ready to practice presence even when it's uncomfortable. I'm ready to become someone who owns their own attention. Subscribe if you want to continue building the architecture of a conscious life. This channel exists for people who refuse to sleepwalk through their existence, who understand that transformation requires philosophy made practical, ancient wisdom made systematic. And share this with someone who's still trapped in the illusion that their phone use is harmless, still mistaking constant distraction for connection, still believing that the fragmentation of their attention doesn't matter. The Stoics knew something we're only now remembering. Freedom isn't the absence of discipline. It's the presence of choice in every moment. You've spent years training unconsciousness. Now you train awareness. The cage was never locked. The door was never closed. You only had to stop running from yourself long enough to realize you could walk through it. The phone will still be there tomorrow. The question is, will you? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more of such deep, thought-provoking content.